Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Lashing Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar, and I'm your host. I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Kevin Quigley. Kevin, banner day for Penn State Athletics. Wrestling gets a big win over Missouri. Sunday night, basketball gets to 10-2. I don't know if you know this, but Penn State won a playoff game in football. James Franklin earned his 100th win at Penn State. Still 309 wins off the record. And most importantly, I do want to give a shout out to the women's volleyball team from Penn State, who throttled Louisville in what was a home game for Louisville at the KFC Yum Center. And it was just an absolute masterclass. They came down Friday night from Thursday night, I think it was. They reverse sweep. They went down 0-2, won the next three sets. Today, won the first set, lost the second, and then won the next two to advance to become national champions for the 8th time in team history. First time ever, Katie Schumacher-Cawley became the first female head coach to ever win a women's volleyball championship. Just an absolute banner day for that program, for the Penn State athletics program. And, their purpose is a little bit higher. Coach Schumacher-Cawley is dealing with stage 2 breast cancer.
Yeah, and the 8th national title for the women's volleyball program is one off the all-time record, which is currently set by Stanford. Stanford's been on a bit of a heater the last few years. Obviously, Penn State went on their heater. Both men's and women's programs were winning national championships. When I was in late middle school, early high school, back when I was playing volleyball, I was trying to keep up with college volleyball. That's when it was really starting to break into TV. Watched a lot of those games back in the day. So first national championship for the women, though, since 2014, like you mentioned. And kind of a band. I mean, I was catching it on social media leading up into the tournament and in the tournament, but then made an effort to log in today, watch it on ABC. And Jess Maruzic was stellar. 29 kills and 14 digs, the old volleyball double-double. Joe Juravicius' daughter Caroline is on the squad as well, and then Taylor Trammell, she was their middle hitter today, and she had a couple of good ones and two balls. If you played volleyball, you know what those are. But kind of hearing those terms come back, I haven't played volleyball since my sophomore year of high school, so kind of been out of the game for a bit. But hearing those terms and positions and everything was kind of cool. It took me back. But yeah, shout out to the women. Shout out to Coach Katie for fighting the fight against breast cancer, and then also the historic day that you mentioned of the first female coach to win the national title in women's volleyball. Impressive day and monumental day for female coaches in any sport, but especially women's volleyball at the collegiate level.
It's great to see. Obviously, anytime Penn State wins is a good thing for the Nittany Lions, but man, to see them do that on a national stage, and to see, like James Franklin mentioned it at the press conference yesterday or Saturday after the game, that type of support is awesome. You see James Franklin did a bunch of different things. He's the face of the program, highest paid state employee in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So, I mean, to see that, I think is really cool. And it pays off. I mean, every time Penn State's a winner, and they feed off of each other too. I mean, you look at Kale Sanderson taking wrestlers to basketball games. You look at Mike Rhodes doing the same thing, and even Coach Schumacher-Cawley, who's doing the same thing. They obviously use football for recruiting, and it helps. Athletics is a front porch to university.
And the football team was at a game for basketball the other night. I forget which game it was. It was a home game. I don't really remember. Did they play? Who was the Big Ten opponent they played at home? Purdue.
I'm not 100% sure. Yeah,
Purdue.
That's it.
Purdue.
Yes.
Denai Denton Sutton was courtside underneath the basket. I just caught a glimpse of him underneath the basket as the camera panned around. So athletics are contagious. It's community. Sure, the football program has its own building versus the rest of the programs on campus, but programs supporting programs, continuity across the board. If you start winning in one program, like you said, it's contagious across the other. And it's just so cool to see other sports getting national attention, national TV coverage. I mean, sure, it was going up against the NFL today, but record attendance for both the semifinals and the finals. So great for sports all around, and especially the women's volleyball program at Penn State.
Speaking of sports all around, Penn State played in the first ever home playoff game at Beaver Stadium on Saturday afternoon, and they dismantled SMU. Absolutely dismantled them from, I don't want to say the opening kick because they went 3 and out and had a short drive, but SMU then ends up giving up a touchdown after on one of their early drives, and that was a pick 6 to Dom DeLuca. It was one of the slower runs I've ever seen. Not to be outdone by Tony Rojas's pick 6 later in a game that was also one of the plays that just ran in slow motion. And it was at that point that I thought that Penn State wasn't going to have any issues with SMU, because the amount of effort that they gave up on that play for Rojas was brutal.
Yeah. And it was complimentary too. So defense, and this was a gripe that we had last year, is that the teams didn't always play complimentary football. And a gripe that we had earlier this season, because the offense was starting slow, or the offense would get a drive, and then there's a lull in the middle of the half, and then the offense is relying on the defense. And the defense is still adjusting to speed. But yesterday, defense comes out hot. Although 7-play 49-yard drive for SMU to start. Twitter was burning down. Luckily, Kevin Jennings made that crucial error down near the goal line. Probably he had the first down, probably could have done it on his legs. Went for 6 points instead of the 6 yards. Throws an incomplete pass to the end zone. Penn State takes over on downs there. And then the 2 pick sixes really just turned the game on top of their head. Penn State gets the ball back again. That's when they fumbled the tush push at their own 19-yard line. Oh boy, what are we doing? And then Dom DeLuca bails them out again. So kind of mentioned in the pregame that Kevin Jennings was reckless with the ball, and if you put him under pressure, he's bound to make mistakes. If you make him hold onto the ball, he's bound to force some throws. Penn State was able to do that. I think defense was dominant yesterday. And then the offense got and scored 14 points of their own to end the second quarter on back-to-back drives. So looked like SMU had a chance to win the middle 8. They got the ball with like 4.5 minutes left, and it was kind of like SMU, if they put a drive together here, if they put a drive together here, they could potentially get some points, and then they get the ball to start the second half. Maybe they're only down 7 with a chance to tie it or get within 1 score. And that really could have changed the game. But defense stood up. They got their 3 first half turnovers, and then the offense finally gets going. They score their 14 points, and it's 28-0 at halftime. Just what a game by the defense.
Yeah, I mean, they came out hot, and that's not something, they gave up 49 yards in the first drive, whatever. That's going to happen. And that typically happens, more often than not. But for them, they came out and responded. James Franklin and Tom Allen and Kotelnicki too, to an extent. I thought they called an aggressive game plan. And I think, obviously it doesn't really look that way offensively, but I think they tried to be aggressive when they needed to be. I mean, obviously the 4th and 1, and then you see them going for it later there instead of a 46-yard field goal. And you now know why that happened, right? And
because that was into the wind, and that was
right.
A stiff breeze yesterday.
Yes,
and
it was
I think
a swirling wind, and it's not the winter in central Pennsylvania is not a fun place for kickers. It was a bad day for punters. And honestly, you saw that in the Notre Dame game too, because the weather impacted that. Just the slightest breeze is going to impact that ball and where it lands on your foot, no matter whether you're kicking it or whether you're punting it. But again, they did everything that they needed to do defensively, and then some. They were buzzing throughout the entirety of the game, and Kevin Jennings was running for his life, and it was a great display of football. They dominated up front, which is where we said they needed to win the game. And Penn State ran the ball down their throat. They threw 4 total passes in the second half. They just grounded out the game, and it paid off. Obviously when you're spotted 14 points from your defense before your offense even has a chance to get into a rhythm, it's one of those. It's a good day. But I think that also played into why the offense wasn't as great as it was. Every time they turned around and did something, the defense was right back on the field because they scored obviously 2 defensive touchdowns. So it was hard to get the offense into a rhythm. But again, Drew Aller didn't make very many mistakes. Penn State was able to get their backup quarterback in a college football playoff game, and they got out of there relatively healthy.
Yeah, I think, and if you look at the stats, I think they only had a little over 100 yards in the second half, 31 minutes of time of possession. That's because the defense was scoring points. They were getting those turnovers that you mentioned. And then because they're scoring on them, the offense, SMU's offense gets to double up their TOP. They're 100 yards in the second half. Ethan throws that interception on his first attempt, but I think it was critical that even if that he threw the interception, I don't think it's his fault. I think it's just he had to get it over the defensive lineman. Trey Wallace jumps up and tips the ball. Tip ball interceptions are kind of just, they are what they are. It's not a mistake. But yeah, I think it was crucial that he got in with the departure of Bo Prabula. And I failed to mention on the pregame podcast, but glad it didn't really come to fruition. How did the absence of Bo Prabula and the practices leading up affect the defense's preparation? Because they probably could have used Bo Prabula, not necessarily in a full scout team role, but they've seen it a lot. And I think because he's been there all year, the defense was able to prepare for that. But Ethan gets in because they are up so big, which is nuts. Only Penn State and Ohio State were able to do that this weekend. More on that later, but it's valuable reps, even though he didn't have to he didn't really throw the ball after that incompletion. I think, was that his only pass attempt of the day?
No, he completed. He did complete
one for 9 yards.
First down. But the fact of the matter is they got him in. And imagine being him in your first game as a playoff, is one of the playoff games. But again, Penn State was in total control of that game throughout all 60 minutes, really. And I think that's the way that it needed to be. And I don't think that SMU – it's not a situation where I don't think SMU didn't deserve to be there. I think that – and that's a discussion we're going to have later in the podcast. But again, it's just one of those situations for me. Penn State came ready, and SMU did not. And it was that simple. And Penn State did not play a clean game on offense. They didn't make very many mistakes. Obviously, that one turnover was bad. But at the same time, they rushed for 160 yards against the 4th-ranked defense for rushing in the country. And both Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton got theirs, 90 and 70 yards, I think it was. But for them, Penn State was set up with really good field position. I mean, their average start was at their own 31, but so many of those started, the Penn State 30 was how it started out, 32, SMU 38, SMU 48, PSU 43, PSU 42 right before the half. So, I mean, they had a lot of good spots in field position. And it's just kind of one of those deals, and for Penn State to come out there and handle their business, that's exactly what they needed to do. They survived. Now it's their survival of the fittest, right? Survive and advance. And not only did they just survive, they thrive too. And I think when you're able to do that in all 3 facets of the game, Penn State deserved to win. Now they get to play Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the box score, Drew Aller 13 and 22 for 127, no touchdowns, but more importantly, no interceptions after he threw 2 against Oregon. I really think, and you were there, but you were close to the press box. I really think the wind was playing a massive part, because it seemed like either way you were going, because of the swirl, like you were throwing it in both. You were into the wind both directions, though you're slightly more downwind going to the north end zone. But then it seemed to just be impacting the ball. The cold weather played a part. He was throwing a lot of fastballs early, not a lot of touch. If your hand's numb, you can't feel your fingertips, you can't feel your grip pressure. You're going to have to resort to the fastball. So I don't really weigh too much on his completion percentage, because the looks were there. The throws they were lacking touch, but when they're in the Fiesta Bowl in Scottsdale, it's going to be 72 degrees inside. Like it's not going to be an issue. And the last time he played in a dome, he put up how many yards through the air, and the offense
Right.
put up nearly 500 yards. Yeah, I survive in advance. They win by 28, beat the spread, beat SMU. James Franklin gets a top 10 ranked win. Add that to his resume. SMU was the 10th ranked team in the country. So, good on him, and we'll see him New Year's Eve at 7:30.
And with that, we're going to go into the second segment where we're going to talk a little bit more about what happened around college football for the playoff over the weekend when we come back from this break on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. He's Kevin. I'm Jarrod. Kevin, Penn State wasn't the only team in action over the weekend. Obviously, you've got regular bowl season, which is kind of taking a back seat. I don't know that there's any hype in those games now. For me, at least, maybe the Pop-Tarts Bowl, just because of the theatrics with it. They have a Pop-Tart or an actual Pop-Tart toaster as part of the trophy, which I think is pretty damn cool. But for me, obviously, it's just kind of taking a back seat to what's going on in the college football playoff. And I love this brand of college football. I think it's great. I think 12 teams is probably just enough. And again, this is a debate for another day. Could you go to 16? Maybe 8's the best one, but I like 12. Are 12 teams capable of winning a national championship? Obviously not. And that was proven over the weekend. It got started with a rout in Indiana, South Bend. Notre Dame dismantled Indiana pretty handedly, which we expected. And I really like Kirk Cignetti to an extent, but the fact of the matter is he's like this dude that you go to school with in high school. You go see him on a Thanksgiving break or Christmas break, and this dude's out there at the bar talking like he's going to be like he would be the greatest coach of all time, and just talks up all this junk, and then goes out and just lays an absolute egg in the turkey bowl with all the friends the next day.
I thought it was pretty funny. I think it was Mark Brennan who had it. Could be misquoting that, but I'm pretty sure it was Mark Brennan. He said, how ironic is it that head coach of the year, Kirk Cignetti, relies on chronic underperformers in Ryan Day and James Franklin to bail out the Big Ten because Indiana laid the egg. And sure, they made it competitive. They scored, 14 points in the fourth quarter in garbage time. Notre Dame didn't care at all. I think backup defense, or at least a good mix of ones and twos defense, was in. They're up 28 points with 8 minutes left. They don't care. They're up 24 points with 6 or 8 minutes left. They didn't care at all. Ugly game, ugly weather. Riley Leonard didn't really throw for any amount of yards, but he didn't have to because they break that 98-yard touchdown.
Yes.
Oh early. My God.
That was awesome.
Yeah, so Jeremiah Love breaks that 98-yard touchdown, and kind of the rest is history from there. Indiana put up 0 yards until the fourth quarter when Notre Dame stopped caring. So Battle of Indiana went the way that we expected it, but it doesn't mean that Indiana doesn't deserve to be there. And I think we're going to talk more about that on the third segment.
Yeah, and it was a very weird playoff day. All the lower seeds won. Obviously, Penn State won, Notre Dame won, Ohio State won in a rout, and Texas beat Clemson. But going to that Texas game, that probably was a closer game than it seemed. Texas rattled up. It was 28-10 at one point, and not a great day for the ACC. Obviously, the Big 12 was the only conference. Well, that and them in the Mountain West were the only ones that weren't playing on Saturday. But again, Texas just went out and handled business. Now they get that matchup against their former against Arizona State, and it's going to be very interesting to see, how the Horns do it.
Yeah, and I thought that game was going to be a little bit more competitive than it was, especially with the way Clemson comes out. They take the opening kick in 6.5 minutes, 75 yards to the house. But then they shot themselves in the foot, interception, fumble. But then Texas throws the interception, and then during the return, Clemson returns it for 6, but there's an illegal blindside block, which really turned its head on. It's that could have made it a 7-point game. Clemson only gets a field goal in it. Now it's still 2 possessions. Quinn Ewers still doesn't look healthy. I know Texas put up 38 points, but I mean, then Arch Manning fumbles the snap. I'm not faulting him, but quarterback play is probably not spectacular at Texas. Granted, Arch doesn't have a lot of experience. Quinn Ewers is hurt, but really thought that game would be a lot closer. But Texas puts up 21 points in the second quarter. I think I was working out in my garage at that time, and I just look up, and then all of a sudden Texas just up 3-4 scores, and I'm like, oh, yep, it's over. It was hard to hold with every game that wasn't Penn State's, and I guess even Penn State's in the fourth quarter, until I watched Ethan Grunkemeier's first series, and then I lost interest. For a lot of these games, I lost interest by halftime. In Texas, yeah. It was definitely one of them, because
I can see that
with the NFL. Because shout out to YouTube TV, they had the Steelers Ravens and a Clemson Texas multi-view going, which was nice. So I was flipping the audio back and forth. But once Texas was up by 3 scores, I flipped the audio over to the Steelers Ravens game, which also wasn't any better.
Yeah, well, my team is currently playing as we record, and they're officially out of the playoffs, which is great. So, of course, they're scoring points. But, yeah, it was just a weird day all around. Obviously, the weather in the Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Penn State games all played a significant factor. And, you look at kind of why they were the scores that they were. Obviously, Ohio State handled Tennessee. Tennessee looked disinterested at times, which was wild. But, that's the way the cookie crumbles. That's not saying that Tennessee doesn't deserve to be in there. And again, this is a debate we're going to get into kind of later in the show. But again, teams just went out and flat out prepared and took care of business. Ohio State had 3 weeks to prepare. Penn State had 2 weeks to prepare. Texas had 2 weeks to prepare. Clemson and SMU, they all had 2 weeks to prepare. So, I mean, you just go out and you take care of business, and the better coached teams did that. Ryan Day gets a lot of flack for beating or for losing to Michigan the way that he has, and deservedly so. Just like James Franklin gets flack for losing to Ohio State. That does not mean that they're not bad coaches. They can definitely do it. And listen, honestly, I think if Clemson has a different coach, I don't think that they get to where they're at, but that game ends up not being as close as it is. So, I mean, it's just one of those situations where coaching, especially now, matters. And what you saw for Penn State, they were aggressive when they needed to be. They weren't afraid to go for it. And you kind of got to give Penn State credit. They were aggressive when they needed to be, and they weren't afraid to do it.
Yeah, and just to touch on the Ohio State Tennessee game, Ohio State, and it had to be a good day in your household, especially after that first quarter. Ohio State goes up 21-0, and kind of really, I wanted it a close game, and maybe I was rooting for Tennessee to beat Ohio State, but the Ohio State-Oregon matchup has the intrigue. Obviously, you want the Big Ten to do well, but to go out 21-0 and then just see all of the SEC fan tears, just Twitter melting down.
Yeah, they shut up pretty quick.
Lane Kiffin goes 0 dark 30 on us, and just he's still underwater somewhere. I don't know if he's tweeted.
That was the only game that we didn't agree on, right?
No, I think we were both chalky. I didn't write it down, but I'm pretty sure we were both chalk. I'm pretty sure we were all chalk that week. But we did picks for. We'll have to go back and look at the tape, but I'm pretty sure we were both chalky on that one. Home teams all the way.
Which, yeah, there needs to be. If there's anything that I would change about the playoff, more home games. Home games were absolutely incredible. That was great. I was a little underwhelmed with the presentation aspect of it. There weren't any commemorative programs and those sorts of things. And obviously, I've been very outspoken about the food situation at Beaver Stadium, hot dogs and some sort of mystery meat again, which wasn't great. But if that's your only complaint, it is what it is. But it's very weird, being in the stadium and not seeing any corporate signage, which is one of the biggest changes for the CFP. But that would be my only change in the playoff. More home games.
Yeah, but I love the home team aspect. We just probably need to adjust the way the teams are set up for the playoff.
Well, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more here when we get into the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast after this quick break on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. He's Kevin. I'm Jarrod. Kevin, it's year one for the expanded playoff. There's a lot more that can happen. There's a lot more that we can debate and whatever. But I think the biggest thing right now is that there hasn't been a single underdog that has done anything worth a damn so far.
Yeah, and speaking of underdogs, we're sponsored by Good Dog, who are not underdogs. Good Dog offers a variety of products, including vodka and whiskey cocktails, along with bourbon hard seltzers. Through Good Dog's Leverage the Beverage program, they donate a portion of the profits from every case sold and 100% of the merchandise sales profits to service dogs for people in need. You can go to gooddogbeverage.com. That's good, DOGG beverage.com to find merchandise and the closest retailer carrying Good Dog beverages to you. I was talking to them the other day. If it's not close to you, they are expanding in 2025. So be on the lookout for expanded offerings there.
That's what we like to hear, Kevin. And speaking of expanding, I don't know what the perfect iteration of the college football playoff is, but I do love this brand. Like I really like the 12-team playoff. And I'm not saying that because Penn State won their first round game. They're going to like Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl or whatever. But I have been engaged in every single game for nearly every team that's in the top 25 all season long.
Yeah, there was a stake in everything. People who said that the regular season wouldn't matter, the regular season 100% mattered, because even if you lost a game and every team but Oregon lost a game, you were still in it. And Ohio State loses that second game against Michigan, it still mattered to them. Yes, they were getting in the playoff regardless. But if you look at social medias lately, Ohio State fans are pissed about Michigan losing to Michigan, but they are still in the playoff and they're still calling for their coach's head. So the regular season still matters. I think 12 is too many. I'm okay with it being 12 as long as everyone just knows that the 12 is too many. But I think with the 12, you need to scrap college conference championships or keep conference championships. I'm more in the box of scrapping it. Going with a regular season champ gets the auto bid. Clemson getting in because they won the conference championship game against SMU quickly showed that that's kind of a flawed. So it opens up some opportunities. I'm kind of give or take on conference championship games, but we need to go. Actually, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think the biggest thing for me is if you're going to scrap the conference championship games, you got to move everything up. I think every major conference needs to go to 8 conference games. And honestly, what I would do is I would schedule a crossover. I would schedule a crossover somehow, some way between where that you have 8 conference games and a Power 5 game. And it alternates every year where Penn State hosts a Big 12 team or an ACC team or an SEC team one year, and then they go somewhere else the next year. That's the only way that you can kind of make sure everything kind of stays equal. And I know that's tough for the group of 5 conferences like the Mountain West, the Pac-12 at the moment. But at the same time, that's the only way to equal out the playing field. And for me, 12 teams is a nice little spot there. 16 probably seems like too many. I think the biggest thing is that it goes into the second semester. So it just kind of changes all the dates, which is weird because January 10th or January 20th is the national title game, which is absolutely absurd to me. So if you take out that conference championship game, you go with the top 12, and then you have a team a team from each conference, each Power Four conference gets an at-large or gets an automatic bid. So the team that finishes in first place, or if they're 16th, or if they're in that 13 through 16, they get an automatic spot. A highest ranked group of 4 team versus or whatever gets a spot in it, and you go with 12 teams, and then the top 4 highest ranked get a bye. Then you play the next. You'd play that quarterfinal round at campus home sites on the week that maybe the week after conference championship should have been. At least give a bye week there. Give that the Army Navy game, and then you go into the rest of the quarterfinals and make sure that you get your bowl games and whatever. But you also have to go with work with the NFL. Don't run against each other, because now those semifinal or quarterfinal games, coming up are now going to be on Thursday and Friday semifinals are Thursday and Friday. After they get through the quarterfinal games, the Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, the Rose Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, and I'm okay with I'm okay with the scheduling right now, but like I hate the NFL. The NFL is so greedy. Yeah, the Thursday and Friday games are going to stink, 7:30 p.m. both nights. But like NFL is so damn greedy, and they don't care about anybody at all but themselves. They put 4 teams on a short week this week to play on Saturday, and then put them on another short week back to back, same 4 teams to play on Wednesday for Christmas. I hate the NFL. That's a whole nother rant, but I like it. So I'd even be okay with 7 conference games for the Big Ten and the SEC. You must play one other program in the SEC and then one other program from either the ACC or the Big 12. That's the Big Ten's 9 conference games. SEC actually has to play another FBS team because they're usually scheduling the Tennessee School of the Deaf and Blind for a FCS or Division III opponent Thanksgiving weekend. We need to get rid of that, because if the SEC is going to cry so much about Alabama getting left off over SMU, Tennessee, Clemson, Indiana, then you can't be playing Mercer the 2 days after Thanksgiving. Like, it's just unacceptable to do that. But like, let's not also look at the fact that in the 14 playoff, there were blowouts every year in both the semifinals and or the finals. 52-20 first year Oregon over Florida State. 38-0 Alabama over Michigan State in 2015. 31-0 Clemson over Ohio State in 2016. 24-6 Alabama over Clemson. 30-3 Notre Dame. Clemson over Notre Dame. 63-28. 27-6. 65-7. These are some embarrassing scores. Georgia 34-11 over Michigan in 2021. These are some embarrassing scores, and these were the 4 best teams in the country. When there's 12, there are going to be blowouts. And unless they fix the seeding, which I think is the problem, the seeding is the issue, because Arizona State and Boise State should not have a bye. Yes, they won their conference, and congratulations, you're the 12th and 13th ranked teams in the country, or 12th and 14th teams in the country, whatever they are. Congratulations. You won or Boise State's 9. Arizona State's 12. Clemson was 14. Congratulations. You won your conference. Guess what? You're in the 12 team dance. But for them to get a free pass, they don't have to play a game. Why is Arizona State at 12 with 3 losses? Clemson or Arizona State with 3 losses, getting a free pass past the first round. Whereas teams like Texas and Penn State are having to play that extra game. People have been saying Oregon has the hardest path. Oregon gets to play one less team than compared to Penn State and Texas, who earned a first round bye. Now, Oregon has to play the highest ranked team left of the top 4 teams in the country, if you want to call them that. Like, yeah, that stinks for them, but also they get to play 60 minutes left of football. I don't think reseeding is the answer after the first week. Like, Boise State and Arizona State now having to play the lower ranked of those two, having to play Oregon, the number 1 team. I don't think that's the issue, but Forgive me if you're watching on YouTube. I'm not a graphics designer, well documented on this program, but look at what the bracket would be if they seeded based off rankings with auto bids. Clemson at Notre Dame. It's probably potentially a blowout, but competitive.
Boise an ACC game in every other scenario or every other sport besides football.
Yeah, but a matchup that I don't think happened this year. And it's not like they couldn't have tweaked this. They cooked the rankings in the top 4 playoffs because they didn't want SEC and Big Ten playing SEC Big Ten in the first round. If the conference matchup happened just so happened to happen in the final game, in the championship game, that was okay. But they always cooked the rankings so that there wasn't a conference matchup in the quarterfinals. So maybe they adjust this. Boise State at Indiana. Banger of a game. Winner goes and plays Oregon. Arizona State, Ohio State. Arizona State, congratulations. You won the Big 12. Guess what? You're going to Columbus. And then SMU at Tennessee. SMU at Tennessee has a lot of intrigue. Newcomer to the ACC, bunch of oil money, and has to go play what SEC fans after the Ohio State game. Magically, Tennessee is now like the 6th ranked team in the SEC, which I thought was hilarious.
You mentioned the oil money. The craziest thing I think yesterday is that they couldn't fly into State College Airport. State College Airport filled up with all the private jets and everything for SMU. So they had to be diverted to Williamsport, and there were a lot of people that missed a good chunk of the first part of the game.
Yeah. But if you're looking on YouTube, you can watch it. If not, just listen verbally to what the matchups they were. Like, that playoff on paper looks so much better, and I think that's what they need to go to, because Boise State and Arizona State getting automatic buys, not cool. Texas and Penn State getting perceived easier routes to the quarterfinals. Like, is it an easier route by strength of opponent? Yes, but they've also been penalized for being the second best team in the top 2 conferences with having to play an extra game, which I don't think is fair. So yeah, Oregon's got to play Ohio State in a cross country flight for Ohio State at the Rose Bowl. But Penn State and Texas got disadvantaged, and it's not just being a Penn State homer. Like, yeah, I'm happy with Penn State that they get to play SMU and Boise State, but I don't know. The format here is just, would this seeding on this still have some blowouts in it? Yeah, I think Clemson Notre Dame's a blowout. Boise State Indiana is probably a blowout, just because I don't think Indiana's that good. Arizona State Ohio State, yeah, like there are blowouts here, but the next round would look so much better. And then you don't have to hear people with blasphemous calls for reseeding after the first round. That's not how sports work. The World Cup doesn't work that way. The NCAA tournament doesn't work that way. The number 1 seed that wasn't in UVA's bracket, when UVA loses to UMBC, doesn't get to cry and be like, no, like now they're number 2 seed. I think it was Arizona that year. The number 2 seed in UVA's bracket gets an easier route to the final because the number 16 team beats the 1 team. Reseeding is not how sports works. It works on an ideology, but like that's not how you run a tournament.
Right. And I think it's so subjective, right? I mean, and obviously hindsight's always going to be 2020. But it's again, the benefit is Penn State has a chance to be in the Final Four. So does Texas. And is that fair? I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. Should they have been in their where they were at? Maybe, maybe not. Penn State's schedule wasn't great, but again, all the teams here did, except for maybe, save for Clemson and Arizona State, is they won the games that they needed to win. For Arizona State, they won the Big 12 championship. For Penn State, they won every game but 2. One was a conference championship against Oregon, and the other one was a 1-possession game against Ohio State. Oregon's won every game. Texas has been in every game except for when they played Georgia and they got beat twice. Ohio State, they won every game but the game. So, I mean, these teams are winning. And listen, the SEC, the wine fest, well, listen, if Tennessee was your second best option or third best option, well, Christ, like, that's a team that looked bad. And they beat Alabama and they beat other teams.
Lane Kiffin was embarrassing this weekend. He was embarrassing himself. He was embarrassing for the SEC conference as well. If you want to cry about not being in the playoff, don't lose to Kentucky and don't lose to Florida. It's easy. Right. And if you're Alabama fans, shut up. You got 24-3 in Norman, Oklahoma without the top 5 wide receivers from the start of the season for the Sooners. So the worst Oklahoma team in probably, 3-4 years?
Mm-hmm. And you got beat by Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt. Nobody goes into Nashville and leaves without a good story.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
And that's the problem. Like, you have to win the games that matter. Every game matters. And that's the one thing that James Franklin has done super well. And, 100 wins doesn't happen because you suck. 100 wins happens because you're pretty good. And, the storylines are really weird because, that's the 100th win for James Franklin. That's the last game in that rendition of Beaver Stadium, with the West Side coming down. The press spots, RIP, right? You've been up there a couple times now. It's not something that's going to be missed, not by any means. But, I think that's one of those things that's kind of cool. But, again, Penn State survived. They thrived. And now they're playing my beloved Boise State Broncos in the Fiesta Bowl to advance to the Final Four, to play in the Orange Bowl against the winner of Georgia and Notre Dame. And both teams, we're going to talk about this not necessarily this week, but next week. It's going to be very interesting to see how both of these teams play. Boise State's been off for quite a long time. Penn State had the benefit of playing this week, so there's a lot riding on this one, and there's a lot of those storylines going into the Fiesta Bowl.
Yep, game is on Tuesday. New Year's Eve is Tuesday night. Probably record Sunday and be out Monday for the pregame show for that one. A little bit tighter than what we usually do, but record Sunday. Episodes will be published on Monday, 12:30. And last little tidbit, you mentioned James Franklin's 100th win is since 2022. This is Penn State's 33rd win. That is 4th in the nation behind Georgia, Michigan, and Oregon.
Yeah. Again, they're doing everything that they need to do. Now, can that continue? Can they continue to beat teams that they're supposed to beat? Boise State is a team that Penn State should and is expected to beat. This time, the expectations are higher. The ramifications are higher. This is the national semifinal. This is a Fiesta Bowl. Penn State has never lost a Fiesta Bowl. And Boise State is known for their not necessarily their random performances, but their performances in the Fiesta Bowl. And it's a very exciting matchup. You're going, a two-headed monster in Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen up against the biggest monster in the backfield, an Ashton Genty. And that's what's great about the playoff. 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to get this type. This is the first time Boise State and Penn State have ever faced off. And I think that's a really unique situation. And that's kind of what the playoff brings.
Yeah, and Boise State also undefeated in the Fiesta Bowl. They're 3-0. So one team will leave the Fiesta Bowl with a loss.
And one team's going to head to South Beach.
Yep.
But, Kevin, for now, any parting shot?
Nah, it's Christmas week. I'm feeling jolly, feeling good about people. My wife went to the Eagles Commanders game with a friend today for Christmas. Lost her wallet. Somebody was kind enough to not take anything out of her wallet and turn it into guest services. So she was able to recover that unscathed. So I'm feeling good about people today. I'm not going to rant about people.
Go Commanders. I needed that one from them, even though it knocked the Cowboys out of playoff contention, which is about this time every year. Late December, early January, where, their season ends. And as the wise Michael Parsons once said, F Philly, right? I'm in my fantasy semifinals, and the guy I'm playing against had a lot of members of the Philadelphia Eagles team, so that's never fun. But it's so far so good. But yeah, I mean, now it's time for the Fiesta Bowl. It's time for a party. I will not be at the game unless something miraculous happens. Unfortunately, based on not necessarily this travel schedule, but travel costs. We talked about the logistics of everything. It's putting all my eggs in the potential Orange Bowl basket, and maybe even more.
Yep, should be good. Yeah, I will not be making the trip across to the Fiesta Bowl, but Miami trip would be pretty doable. I could fly direct from Richmond for there. So,
well, maybe we might be leaving maybe we'll leave from Richmond together, take the podcast on the road. But for Kevin Quigley, and this has been Jarrod Prugar on the Lasching Out Podcast, Nittany Sports Now Network. We want to thank you all for listening and wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll catch you again later after the holiday.